Blood doesn't freeze the way people think it does. Seris Vale learned this as she pressed her palm against the forest floor, watching red spread across white snow like spilled ink. The cold didn't numb the pain. It sharpened it, made every heartbeat a hammer against her ribs. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in from all sides. Not yet, she thought. Not like this. The rejection mark on her shoulder blade still burned, flesh torn and branded in a ceremony meant to erase her from pack memory. They'd made sure everyone watched. Made sure everyone understood what happened to Omegas who knew too much. Graypine Forest didn't care about pack politics. The ancient trees stood silent as Seris crawled forward, one hand clutching the leather satchel pressed against her chest. Inside were records, names, dates. Evidence of every Omega who'd disappeared when resources ran thin and leadership needed convenient solutions. She'd spent 3 years copying those ledgers by hand, hiding duplicates in places Alphas never looked. Grain silos, abandoned dens, hollowed trees along the border. Hi viewers, have you ever kept a secret that could destroy someone powerful? Drop a comment and let me know what happened. Now those records were all she had left, and she was bleeding out in frozen dirt with hunters closing in behind her. A sound cut through the wind, thin, desperate, not human. Seris stopped crawling. The whine came again, sharper this time, edged with panic. She turned her head, snow crunching beneath her cheek, and saw movement 30 feet to her left. White fur, small body, steel teeth clamped around a tiny leg. A wolf cub caught in a trap meant for trespassers. Her breath caught. The pup couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old, its coat still downy, eyes wide with terror. It struggled weakly against the snare, blood matting the pristine fur around its trapped limb. Seris knew what stopping meant. Knew her body had maybe 10 minutes of consciousness left, maybe less. The hunters tracking her scent would find her if she didn't keep moving. But she also knew what those traps did to bone. She thought about the ledgers. All those names crossed out in red ink, each one representing someone who'd been convenient to forget. Someone leadership decided wasn't worth the resources to keep alive. The cub whined again, a sound so raw it cut through the fog in her head. Seris made a choice that would crack the world open. She crawled toward the trap. Her fingers shook as they found the release mechanism, slick with blood, hers and the cub's mixing together in the snow. The steel was old, rusted, designed to hold until something died or gave up. "Easy," she whispered, though she didn't know if she was talking to the cub or herself. "Just easy." The pup snapped at her once, teeth clicking near her wrist, then collapsed back with exhaustion. Its eyes met hers, gold and ancient and somehow knowing. Seris pried the jaws apart. The cub yelped as the pressure released, then immediately tried to run. His leg buckled, fell hard, whimpering. She tore fabric from the hem of her dress, already ruined, already soaked with her own blood, and wrapped the wound as best she could with numb fingers. The cub didn't fight this time, just watched her with those unsettling golden eyes while she worked. That's when she saw it. A mark on the cub's right shoulder, barely visible beneath matted fur. Not a natural pattern, a brand. 3 interlocking circles. The royal crest. Seris's heart stuttered. This wasn't just any wolf. This was... Voices erupted from the tree line behind her. The Omega's scent just went live. "She's close. Spread out. Don't let her reach the border." The hunters, at least 4, maybe more, their boots crashing through underbrush with the confidence of men who knew their prey was dying. Seris looked at the cub, looked at the satchel still pressed against her chest, looked at the ancient oak tree 10 feet away, its trunk split by lightning years ago, the hollow inside dark and deep. She had seconds to decide. The cub couldn't run. She couldn't carry it. And if the hunters found a royal wolf cub with a rejected Omega, they'd kill them both and call it justice. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She shoved the satchel deep into the tree hollow, pressing it past dead leaves and old nests until her arm disappeared to the elbow. Then she pressed her forehead against the rough bark, lips moving in a whisper meant for no one and everyone. "Remember, The word tasted like prayer and threat all at once. She grabbed the cub. It yelped but didn't resist, and stumbled in the opposite direction of the tree, deeper into Graypine, leaving a blood trail impossible to miss. Behind her, the hunter's shouts grew louder. The cub was heavier than it looked, or maybe she was just weaker than she wanted to admit. Every step sent lightning through her legs, her vision swimming with black spots that wouldn't clear. She made it maybe 200 yards before her knees gave out. The world tilted sideways. Snow rushed up to meet her face. The cub tumbled from her arms, landing in a drift with a soft thud. Seris tried to push herself up. Her arms wouldn't respond, tried to call out a warning to the pup. Her voice had abandoned her. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed everything was the cub limping toward her, dragging its bandaged leg, golden eyes locked on her face like a promise. Then the forest went silent. Not the natural silence of winter woods. Something else. Something that made the hair on her neck stand up even as consciousness slipped away. The hunters' voices cut off mid-shout. A new sound replaced them. Low, resonant, wrong. A growl that didn't belong to any wolf she'd ever heard. Deeper than thunder, older than the trees. And it was getting closer. Seris had never been meant to matter. She understood this the day she turned 13 and her Omega trait surfaced so faint the pack elders needed 3 tests to confirm what she was. Most Omegas bloomed loud, sent rolling off them like summer storms, impossible to ignore. Seris barely registered. A whisper when leadership expected a shout. The head elder, Dalton Creve, looked at her like a disappointing investment. Records division, he'd said. Not unkindly, just factual. We need someone detail-oriented. You'll do well there. What he meant was, you're not beautiful enough to leverage, not strong enough to inspire, not valuable enough to celebrate. So they tucked her away. The records vault sat in the lowest level of the pack house, a stone room that smelled like old paper and older secrets. No windows, no visitors, just Seris and centuries of pack history stacked on sagging shelves. She'd expected to hate it. Instead, she learned how power actually worked. Not through claws or challenges or dramatic pack meetings. Through paperwork. Through temporary resource reallocations that became permanent. Through names crossed out in red ink with notes like relocated or natural causes written in careful script. Seris noticed patterns the way some people noticed weather. Every harsh winter, 3 to 5 Omegas would disappear from the registry. Their land parcels would be reassigned to beta families within a week. Their food rations would be redistributed to essential pack members before their belongings were even cleared out. No investigations, no questions, just gone. She started making copies. At first it was innocent, backing up records in case of fire or flood, the way any good archivist would. But somewhere around year 2, when she found a ledger showing Omega Kiana Reeves marked deceased, on the same day, her farmland was deeded to Elder Creeve's nephew. Innocent became intentional. Seris began carrying blank journals home, spent nights by candlelight transcribing entries word for word, her handwriting cramping into illegible scrawls by midnight. She hid the copies everywhere, in the grain silo's false bottom, behind loose stones in the old north den, wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath the twisted oak at Graypine's edge. If anyone ever asked what she was doing, she had a script ready. Just backing up the archives, sir. Preserving pack history. No one ever asked. That was the first thing she learned about injustice. It survived because good people found it more convenient not to look. The second thing she learned was that invisibility had advantages. People talked around her like she was furniture. Elders discussed policy changes in the records room, forgetting she existed 3 feet away. Alphas complained about the Omega problem while she filed their territorial claims. She heard everything because no one thought she mattered enough to watch their words. She learned Elder Creve owned 17 properties he never reported. Learned Beta Counselor Jessa Thorne was skimming medical supplies and selling them across the border. Learned the head of security, Marcus Holt, had falsified 3 investigation reports to protect his brother from assault charges. Seris wrote it all down. Not because she had a plan. Not because she thought she could change anything. But because someone needed to remember, and no one else was bothering to try. The winter she turned 19, everything shifted. The first snow came early, vicious, and unrelenting. Hunting territories froze over. Trade routes became impassable. The pack's stored food reserves dropped to dangerous levels by December, and leadership called an emergency council. Seris attended because someone needed to record the minutes. She sat in the corner with her notebook, invisible as always, while 20 pack leaders argued about solutions. The conversation started reasonable rationing plans, emergency hunting parties, requests for aid from neighboring territories. Then Elder Creve stood up. "We need to talk about efficiency," he said, his voice measured and calm. "We're supporting pack members who aren't contributing to survival. Omegas without mates. Elderly without family. We can't afford sentiment right now." The room went quiet. Counselor Thorne nodded slowly. "Temporary measures. Just until spring." "Humane measures," Marcus Holt added. "We're not monsters." Seris's pen stopped moving. She knew what they were really saying. Knew because she'd read 50 years of records that used the exact same language. Efficiency meant disappearances. Temporary meant permanent. Humane meant no one would ask questions. Her hand started shaking so hard she had to set the pen down. No one noticed. The council voted. 17 in favor, 2 abstaining, 0 against. When the meeting ended, Seris walked back to the records vault like nothing had changed. Filed the minutes in the appropriate folder. Locked the door behind her. Then she pulled out every ledger from the last decade and started cross-referencing names. 43 Omegas listed as relocated or deceased during resource shortages. 43 whose land and rations were redistributed within days. Not one had family who questioned it. Not one had friends who demanded answers. Because the pack chose not to see. Seris worked through the night, copying the most damning pages. By dawn, her fingers were black with ink, and her back screamed from hunching over the desk. But she had evidence. Real, undeniable proof of what leadership had been doing for decades. She hid the copies in her usual spots, but this time she added something new. A map. Marked with every location she'd stashed records, coded in a way only she could read. If something happened to her, if she disappeared like the others, maybe someone would find it. Maybe someone would care. 3 weeks later, she was filing updated ration lists when she noticed her own name flagged in the system. Not crossed out. Not yet. Just marked. A small red dot next to Vale, Seris in the Omega registry. Identical to the marks beside 43 other names in the historical records. Her breath stopped. She looked up, suddenly hyper-aware of how empty the vault was, how deep underground, how thick the stone walls were, how easy it would be for someone to disappear down here and never be found. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Seris closed the ledger, hands steady through sheer force of will. She'd learned to hide her reactions years ago, learned that showing fear only made you a target. The footsteps passed by without slowing. She waited 10 minutes. 20. Then she pulled out a blank journal and began copying her own registry page, including the red mark, including the date it appeared, including the notation in the margin. Council review pending. That night, she buried the copy beneath the twisted oak. 2 days later, Elder Creve's assistant summoned her to the council chambers. The walk up from the vault felt like climbing toward an execution. Every step echoed too loud. Every pack member she passed seemed to watch her with knowing eyes. When she reached the chambers, 3 elders waited. Creve in the center, flanked by Thorne and Holt. "Seris," Creve said, his smile warm and empty. "Thank you for coming. We need to discuss some inconsistencies we found in the records." Her stomach dropped, but her face stayed neutral. Of course. What kind of inconsistencies? Missing pages. Misfiled documents. He folded his hands on the table. "We're concerned about the integrity of our archives." She knew what this was. A test. A trap. They suspected she'd been copying records, and now they were giving her a chance to confess before they made it official. "I can run a full audit," she offered, voice steady. "Check every entry against the backup logs. We'd appreciate that." Thorne's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And Seris? Make sure you're thorough. We wouldn't want anything overlooked." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Seris nodded. "I'll start immediately." She walked out of that room knowing they'd already decided. The audit was theater. The real decision had been made the moment they marked her name. She had maybe a week before they moved against her. Maybe less. That night, she made one final trip to each hiding spot, checking that the records were secure, that the map was safely buried. She didn't sleep, didn't eat, just walked the territory one last time, memorizing the locations, saying goodbye to a pack that had never really seen her. On the 7th day, they came for her at dawn. Marcus Holt and 4 security officers. No explanation, no ceremony, just "you're needed at Stone Hollow Clearing." Now, Seris looked at the lead officer, a beta named Tay she'd known since childhood. His eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Am I being charged with something?" she asked. "Just come quietly," Tay said. "Don't make this harder." She thought about running, thought about screaming, thought about demanding a fair hearing. But she'd read enough records to know how this ended. So she walked. Stone Hollow Clearing sat at the territory's center, a wide circle of packed earth surrounded by ancient pines. When they arrived, half the pack was already waiting. Elders on one side, families on the other. Everyone watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to carefully cultivated neutrality. In the center of the clearing stood an iron brazier, flames already burning. Seris's breath caught when she saw what rested in the coals. A branding iron, the rejection mark glowing white-hot. This wasn't a trial. It was a performance. Elder Creve stepped forward, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Seris Vale, you stand accused of violating pack trust, of compromising sensitive records, of actions that threaten our collective security." She waited for him to list specific charges. Waited for evidence. He didn't provide any. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked. She looked at the crowd, saw her supervisor from the records vault, the woman who'd trained her, who'd praised her attention to detail. Saw the Baker family, who she'd helped when their son got sick. Saw Tay, who used to walk her home after late shifts. Not one of them stepped forward. That hurt worse than anything that came after. "This isn't punishment," Seris said quietly, just loud enough to carry. "It's containment." Creve's expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. "Proceed," he ordered. They dragged her to the center, ripped the back of her dress open. She didn't fight, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. The iron touched her skin. Pain exploded white-hot across her shoulder blade, the smell of burning flesh choking the air. She bit down hard enough to taste blood but didn't scream. Wouldn't give them that. When they finally pulled the brand away, her knees buckled. Rough hands caught her, held her upright long enough for everyone to see the mark. Then they let go. She fell hard, palms scraping against frozen ground. "You are cast out," Creve announced. "No longer pack, no longer protected. May the forest show you the mercy we cannot." Someone threw her satchel at her feet. The one she'd brought from home that morning, the one she'd packed with the last of her belongings before they came. Seris grabbed it with shaking hands and stood. Her Omega scent broke free then, uncontrolled for the first time in her life. It flooded the clearing, raw and wounded and somehow defiant. Several alphas stepped back, hands going to their weapons on instinct. She didn't care. She walked toward the tree line, each step agony, her vision blurring with pain and shock and something that felt like relief. Because they'd made a mistake. They'd let her keep the satchel. And inside, wrapped in her spare clothes, was one journal, one map, one piece of evidence they hadn't thought to check. Seris reached the forest edge and didn't look back. Behind her, the pack was already dispersing, the ceremony forgotten, her existence already being erased from their collective memory. Ahead, Graypine waited, and somewhere in those ancient trees, 43 voices whispered her name. The first thing Seris noticed about exile was the silence, not the absence of sound. The forest was alive with wind through pine needles, distant bird calls, the creak of branches settling under snow, but pack noise, the constant background hum of nearby heartbeats, shared sense, territorial awareness, cut off so abruptly it felt like going deaf. She'd been walking for maybe an hour when the isolation hit. Her legs shook with every step, the rejection burn on her shoulder blade sending sparks of agony down her spine. The satchel banged against her hip, its weight both burden and lifeline. She needed to stop, needed to rest, needed to do something about the blood soaking through her torn dress. Instead, she kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking down in a forest that would absolutely kill her if she showed weakness. The tree line thickened. Graypine's outer edge gave way to old growth, trunks so wide 3 people couldn't link hands around them. Snow lay deeper here, untouched by pack patrols or hunting parties. Seris's footprints were the only marks, a trail pointing straight back to everything she'd lost. She needed to hide that trail. Needed to. A branch snapped somewhere to her left. She froze, every instinct screaming danger. Her damaged Omega senses couldn't pinpoint the source. Couldn't tell her if it was animal or pack scout or something worse. Another snap. Closer. Deliberate. Seris forced herself to move, angling toward a cluster of thick underbrush. Her breathing came too fast, too loud, fogging the air in front of her face. The satchel caught on a low branch. She yanked it free, kept going. The footsteps behind her didn't bother hiding anymore. She risked a glance back and saw them. 2 figures in hunting gear, moving with the easy confidence of men who knew their prey couldn't escape. Rylan Moss and Garrett Hale, both betas, both security under Marcus Holt's command. Seris, Rylan called out, his voice friendly, concerned. Hold up, we just want to talk. She didn't stop. Come on, Garrett added. You're hurt. Let us help you back. Back. As if exile was a misunderstanding they could fix. As if dragging her to the clearing wasn't the whole point. Seris pushed deeper into the forest, branches whipping at her face, snow dragging at her feet. Behind her, the footsteps sped up. They weren't here to help. They were here to make sure she didn't make it out of Graypine alive. She understood that with sudden, crystalline clarity. Understood that letting her walk away was too risky, that she knew too much, that a rejected Omega dying in the forest was exactly what the elders needed. Tidy. Tragic. No questions asked. Her foot caught on a hidden root. She went down hard, landing on her injured shoulder. The pain whited out her vision for 3 full seconds. When it cleared, Rylan and Garrett were 10 feet away. Easy now, Rylan said, hands raised like he was approaching a spooked animal. We're not gonna hurt you. Garrett's hand rested on the knife at his belt. Seris scrambled backward, her palm closing around a branch half buried in snow. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Stay back, she warned, her voice steadier than she felt. Rylan exchanged a look with Garrett. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Garrett drew the knife. Don't make this difficult, he said. We'll make it quick. You'll just disappear. Happens all the time in Graypine, just like the 43 others. Seris's grip tightened on the branch. She knew she couldn't win a fight, knew they were stronger, faster, better trained. But she could make noise, could leave evidence, could make sure someone found her body and asked questions. She opened her mouth to scream. A howl split the air before she could make a sound. Not close, deep in the forest, echoing between the trees. But wrong. Too low, too resonant. The kind of howl that made prey animals freeze and predators reconsider their life choices. Rylan and Garrett both went still. What the hell was that? Garrett whispered. Another howl answered, from a different direction. Then another. 3 distinct voices, harmonizing in a way that made Seris's bones vibrate. The Triplet Alpha Kings. She knew it the same way she knew her own heartbeat. Knew it from stories she'd heard her whole life about the three brothers who ruled the northern territories with absolute authority. Caelric, Othrin, and Valar Thorn, not related to Counselor Jessa, but close enough to make the name heavy with power. No one saw them often. They stayed in their sanctum deep in Graypine's heart, emerging only when territory was threatened or pack law was broken, or when something had gone very, very wrong. Ryland's face had gone pale. "We need to leave. Now." "What about her?" Garrett gestured at Seris with the knife. "Forget her. If the Kings are active, we don't want to be found anywhere near." A third howl, so close it rattled snow from the branches overhead. Both betas ran. Seris watched them crash through the underbrush like the forest itself was chasing them, their footsteps fading to nothing in seconds. She waited for silence to return. Didn't. The howling had stopped, but something else filled the space it left. Presence. Heavy and aware and focused directly on her. She struggled to her feet, using the branch as a crutch. Her shoulder screamed protest. Her legs threatened to give out. She needed to move. Needed to get away from this spot before. Golden eyes appeared in the shadows between two massive pines. Then two more pairs, flanking the first. 3 wolves, each one massive, each one watching her with an intelligence that had nothing to do with animal instinct. Seris's breath stopped. The center wolf moved forward first. Black coat, silver markings around its eyes, easily 7 feet at the shoulder. Caelric. Had to be. The stories said he was the largest, the enforcer, the one who broke challenges before they started. The wolf on the left was slightly smaller, its coat a deep russet brown, scars visible even through thick fur. Othrin, the fighter, the one who'd never lost a dominance match. The third wolf stayed back, watching with eyes that seemed to see straight through her. White-gray coat, leaner build, something ancient in its gaze. Valar, the strategist, the one people said could read intentions like text. They were supposed to be in the sanctum, miles away, completely unconcerned with rejected Omegas bleeding out in their territory. So why were they here? Caelric took another step forward, lowering his head to scent the air. His lips pulled back slightly, not quite a snarl, something confused and angry and recognition. All 3 wolves tensed simultaneously, their attention laser-focused on her in a way that made Seris's damaged Omega instincts scream warnings she couldn't interpret. Then Valar's gaze dropped to the satchel still clutched against her chest. No, not the satchel. The blood soaking through her dress, the rejection mark still burning on her shoulder. The scent of her Omega nature finally unleashed after 19 years of being too faint to notice. She watched understanding hit all 3 of them at once. Caelric's growl was low enough to shake the ground. Othrin's claws extended, digging furrows in frozen earth. Valar's ears flattened against his skull, his whole body going rigid with something that looked like rage. They knew what had been done to her, and they cared. That didn't make sense. Alpha Kings didn't involve themselves with pack politics, didn't interfere with rejection ceremonies, didn't track exiled Omegas into the forest unless someone had violated their territory. Seris's mind raced. Ryland and Garrett, hunting inside Graypine without permission. That was the violation. That was why the Kings were active. She was just incidental. But the way they were looking at her didn't feel incidental. Caelric shifted closer, movements careful, like he was approaching something fragile. His nose almost touched her injured shoulder before she flinched back on instinct. The reaction made all 3 wolves go absolutely still. Valar made a sound, not a growl, something softer, questioning, almost concerned. Seris didn't understand, couldn't understand. Her brain was shutting down from blood loss and shock and the absolute impossibility of 3 Alpha Kings showing what looked like protective interest in a rejected Omega they'd never met. Her knees buckled. She didn't hit the ground. Caelric moved faster than physics should allow, his massive body positioning beneath her, catching her weight before she collapsed. His fur was warm, impossibly warm. Her fingers tangled in it without permission, seeking heat her body desperately needed. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Othrin's howl. Not a call. Command. And somewhere in the distance, the entire forest responded. Stone Hollow Clearing had never been designed for mercy. The packed earth held memories. Challenges fought, sentences delivered, rejections burned into flesh that would carry the mark forever. Seris had walked past this place 1,000 times, always looking away, always pretending she didn't feel the weight of old pain soaked into the ground. Now she stood at its center, and there was nowhere else to look. The pack formed a circle 3 deep, bodies pressed close despite the cold. Front row for the elders and council members, their faces carved from stone and certainty. Second row for alphas and betas, the pack strength on display. Third row for everyone else. Omegas, children, the elderly, those who would learn from watching what happened when someone stepped out of line. Seris's hands were bound behind her back. Not with rope, with ceremonial cord woven from silver thread, the kind used for formal pack rites. The kind that said this wasn't punishment. This was tradition. Elder Creve stood before her in formal robes, speaking words she'd heard at other rejection ceremonies but never really listened to. The language was old, ritualistic, designed to make cruelty sound like necessity. Act of protection for the greater good of the pack. Her breath came shallow and fast, fogging in the winter air. The iron brazier 20 feet away had been heating for an hour. She could smell it. Hot metal and burning coals and the promise of what came next. Resources are sacred. Trust is sacred. Unity is sacred. Counselor Jessa Thorne stood to Creve's right, her expression sympathetic in a way that made Seris want to scream. This woman had voted for this, had helped orchestrate the charges, had looked Seris in the eye 3 days ago and called her a security risk. Now she looked sad about it. That was the worst part, Seris thought. Not the hatred, the performance of regret. When one member compromises the whole, we are forced to make difficult choices. Marcus Holt held the branding iron now, pulling it from the coals. The rejection mark glowed white-hot at the end, a circle broken by 3 slashing lines. The symbol meant unworthy of pack bond, meant no longer protected, meant death sentence wrapped in ceremony. Seris's supervisor from the records vault, Mariah Chun, stood in the second row. Their eyes met for just a second. Mariah looked away first. Everyone looked away. Seris Vale, Creve's voice pulled her attention back. You are charged with theft of pack records, with violation of confidential archives, with actions that threaten our security and stability. She wanted to laugh, wanted to scream the truth at all of them, wanted to list every name in those records, every Omega who'd disappeared, every piece of evidence she'd hidden across the territory. But her throat had closed. Her voice had abandoned her. All she could do was stand there while they narrated her destruction. Do you have anything to say in your defense? She found her voice then, came out smaller than she wanted but steady. Which part are you really punishing? The records I copied, or the fact that I read them? Creve's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, then smoothed back to neutral. Proceed, he said. 2 security officers grabbed her arms. Tay on her left, a female beta named Shauna on her right. Both people she knew, both refusing to meet her eyes. They marched her to the center of the clearing, where a wooden post had been driven into the frozen ground. They tied her to it facing outward, so the whole pack could see her face when the iron touched skin. Marcus approached with the brand. Up close, she could see his hand shaking. Just slightly. Just enough to know he didn't want to do this but would anyway because orders were orders and questioning meant becoming the next person tied to a post. I'm sorry, he whispered. So quiet only she could hear. Seris looked at him. Really looked. Saw a man who'd falsified reports to protect his brother. Who'd turned a blind eye to 43 disappearances. Who was sorry but not sorry enough to stop. No, you're not, she said. His jaw tightened. Then he ripped the back of her dress open, exposing her shoulder blade to winter air and watching eyes. The cold bit first, then the heat. Marcus pressed the brand to her skin. Pain exploded through every nerve in her body. white-hot and absolute, erasing thought, erasing everything except the desperate animal need to make it stop. Her vision went black at the edges. Her knees tried to buckle, but the ropes held her upright. She tasted blood, had bitten through her own lip without realizing. The smell hit the crowd. Burning flesh, cooking meat, her own body being permanently marked with proof of her unworthiness. Someone in the third row gagged. A child started crying. Marcus held the brand in place for 5 eternal seconds, then pulled it away. Seris couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only exist in the aftermath of agony while her body tried to process what had just happened. "You are cast out," Creve announced, his voice carrying across the clearing with practiced authority. "No longer pack, no longer protected. The bond is severed. The territory is closed to you. May you find mercy beyond our borders." They untied the ropes. She collapsed immediately, unable to support her own weight. Her hands caught the frozen ground, fingers scrabbling for purchase, for anything to anchor her while her body screamed. A satchel landed in the dirt beside her. Her belongings, the few things they'd allowed her to keep. Seris grabbed it with shaking hands, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Inside, wrapped in clothes, was the journal, the map, the evidence they'd been too confident to search for. She needed to stand. Needed to walk out of here with whatever dignity she had left. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Shauna, the beta who'd held her arm, who'd helped tie her to the post, reached down like she was going to help. "Don't," Seris said. Her voice came out broken, raw. "Don't pretend to care now." Shauna's hand froze, then withdrew. Seris used the satchel as leverage, pushing herself up inch by agonizing inch. Her shoulder blade felt like it was still burning, flesh screaming with every movement. But she stood, and standing, she looked at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, some uncomfortable, some relieved it wasn't them, some already losing interest, ready to move on with their day now that the entertainment was over. Not one spoke in her defense. Not one questioned the charges. Not one asked why a 19-year-old records keeper had suddenly become a security threat. That silence told her everything she needed to know about pack unity. Her omega scent broke free then. She'd kept it suppressed her whole life, too faint to matter, too weak to draw attention. But pain and trauma ripped through her control like paper. Her scent flooded the clearing, raw and wounded and somehow defiant, carrying notes of pine smoke and winter rain and something sharp that made every alpha present take an involuntary step back. Because it wasn't weak anymore. It was furious. Elder Creve's eyes widened. Counselor Thorne actually stumbled. Even Marcus, still holding the cooling brand, looked shaken. They'd never felt her scent before. Never knew what she actually was beneath the careful suppression. Too late now. Seris turned toward the tree line, each step agony, her vision blurring with pain and shock. The crowd parted to let her through. No one touched her. No one spoke. She was already erased. The forest swallowed her 10 steps past the clearing's edge. Graypine's ancient trees closed ranks behind her, cutting off the view of Stone Hollow, of the pack, of everything she'd ever known. She walked until her legs gave out, collapsed against a massive oak, sliding down its trunk until she hit frozen ground. The satchel fell from numb fingers. Her whole body shook with reaction, pain and cold and delayed shock all hitting at once. She should keep moving, should put distance between herself and the pack, should find shelter before night fell. Instead, she pressed her forehead against the rough bark and let herself break. No sound, no tears, just the quiet violence of a heart cracking open while the forest watched in silence. When she finally looked up, the sun had moved. An hour gone, maybe more. Her shoulder had stopped screaming and settled into a deep, constant burn that promised infection if she didn't treat it soon. She pulled the satchel close, checking its contents with clumsy fingers. Spare clothes, the journal, a small medical kit someone had packed, probably Mariah, one last gesture of guilt disguised as kindness, and something else, a piece of paper, folded small, tucked into the journal's spine. Seris unfolded it with shaking hands. For words in Mariah's handwriting, "You were always right." Not an apology, not help, just acknowledgement that everything Seris had documented, everything she'd been punished for exposing, was true. She crumpled the note and shoved it deep into the satchel. Acknowledgement without action was just another way of staying silent. Seris forced herself to stand, using the oak for support. Her legs threatened to buckle but held. Barely. She needed to move. Needed to find water, shelter, somewhere to hide while her body tried to heal from what they'd done. She made it maybe 30 yards before she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the forest's natural rhythm. High-pitched, desperate, hurt. Seris stopped, her damaged senses trying to locate the source. There, 20 feet to her left, partially hidden by underbrush. White fur matted with blood. Steel jaws clamped around a tiny leg. Golden eyes wide with pain and terror. A wolf cub caught in a trap meant for trespassers. And somewhere behind her, getting closer, she heard voices. The hunters had found her trail. The cub's whimper cut through everything. Pain, fear, the distant shouts of approaching hunters. Seris stood frozen, her body screaming at her to run, while her mind calculated how much time she had left. Maybe 5 minutes before Rylan and Garrett found her. Maybe less. The trap was old, its steel teeth rusted but still vicious. The kind pack security planted along territory borders to catch trespassers or predators too bold. The kind designed to hold until something died or someone came to finish the job. The cub couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old. Too young to be this deep in Graypine alone. Too young to survive what that trap would do to the bone if it stayed clamped much longer. Seris knew what stopping meant. Knew her body had maybe 10 minutes of consciousness left before blood loss and shock took her down. Knew the hunters tracking her scent would kill her if they found her here. But she also knew what those names in the ledger meant. 43 Omegas who'd been convenient to forget. 43 people no one had stopped to help. The cub whined again, the sound thin and desperate and somehow trusting, like it believed someone would come. Seris made her choice. She dropped to her knees beside the trap, the impact sending lightning through her injured shoulder. The world tilted sideways for 3 full seconds. She breathed through it, forced her vision to clear, forced her hands to stop shaking long enough to be useful. "Easy," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the cub or herself. "I've got you." The pup watched her with those unsettling golden eyes, too aware, too intelligent for something so young. When she reached for the trap's release mechanism, it snapped at her hand, teeth clicking an inch from her wrist. She didn't pull back. "I know," she said softly. "I know it hurts. I know you don't know me, but I'm the only chance you've got right now, so we're doing this together or we're both dying here. Your choice." The cub went very still, like it was actually considering her words. Then it lowered its head and stopped fighting. Seris's fingers found the release catch, slick with the cub's blood and her own mixing together in the snow. The mechanism was frozen, rusted half shut. She pried at it with numb hands, her shoulder screaming protest with every movement. Behind her, the hunters' voices got closer. "She's bleeding heavy. Can't have gone far. Check near the old traps. Rejected Omegas don't know the territory. 20 seconds. Maybe less." Seris braced her foot against the trap's base and pulled with everything she had left. Metal shrieked. The mechanism fought her. Her vision started going dark at the edges. The trap released. The cub yelped as pressure lifted from its mangled leg, tried to bolt, collapsed immediately. The limb couldn't support weight, bone possibly fractured, definitely damaged. Seris tore fabric from the hem of her dress, already ruined, already soaked with her own blood, and wrapped the wound as fast as her shaking hands allowed. The cub didn't fight this time, just watched her with those gold eyes while she worked, its breathing quick and shallow with pain. That's when she saw it. A mark on the cub's right shoulder, barely visible beneath blood-matted fur. Not a natural pattern, a brand. 3 interlocking circles. The royal crest. Her heart stopped. This wasn't just any wolf cub. This was property of the Triplet Alpha Kings. This was... there. I see her. Garrett's voice, maybe 50 yards away and closing fast. No time to process. No time to think. Seris looked at the cub. At the satchel pressed against her chest with its evidence and maps and proof of everything the elders wanted buried. At the ancient oak 10 feet away, its trunk split by lightning years ago, the hollow inside dark and deep enough to hide things no one would think to look for. The cub couldn't run. She couldn't carry it, could barely stay upright herself. And if the hunters found a royal wolf cub with a rejected omega, they'd kill them both and burn the bodies and report it as an unfortunate accident. Her hands moved before her mind finished the calculation. She shoved the satchel deep into the tree hollow, pushing it past dead leaves and old bird nests until her arm disappeared to the elbow. The journal, the map, 3 years of evidence hidden in rotted wood and darkness. Then she pressed her forehead against the rough bark, lips moving in a whisper meant for ghosts and witnesses that didn't exist yet. Remember, she breathed into the wood grain. Someone remember. The word tasted like prayer and threat and promise all at once. She turned back to the cub. It was trying to stand, dragging its bandaged leg, golden eyes locked on her face with something that looked like understanding. No time for gentleness. Seris grabbed the pup. It was heavier than it looked, all dense muscle beneath downy fur, and stumbled in the opposite direction of the tree. Away from the evidence. Away from anything that mattered more than this one small life. The cub squirmed once, then went still in her arms, like it understood they were running together now. Behind her, branches crashed. Ryland's voice, "Stop! We're not here to hurt you. Liars." She'd read their files. Knew Ryland had been present at 4 different Omega disappearances. Knew Garrett had filed false reports about territorial threats to justify expanded hunting grounds. Knew they were here to make sure she never made it out of Graypine with what she knew. Seris ran. Every step was agony. Her shoulders screamed. Her legs shook. The cub's weight threw off her balance, made her stumble over roots she would have normally avoided. But she ran anyway, deeper into old growth where the trees grew so thick even pack hunters would have trouble tracking. Her blood trail marked every step, perfect breadcrumbs leading straight to her. She needed to think, needed a plan, needed. The ground disappeared beneath her feet. She hit the bottom of a shallow ravine hard, the cub tumbling from her arms into a snowdrift. Her vision whited out. When it came back, she was lying on her side, staring at tree roots and frozen earth while her body tried to remember how breathing worked. The cub limped over, pressed its nose against her cheek. Not a lick, just pressure, checking if she was still alive. "Still here," she managed. Her voice sounded wrong, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Above, the hunter's footsteps slowed, stopped. "Lost the trail," Garrett said, frustrated. "Too much blood. Can't tell which direction. Split up. She can't have gone far." Footsteps diverging. One set moving away to the left, one to the right, one coming closer to the ravine edge. Seris held her breath, pressed a hand over the cub's muzzle, praying it understood the need for silence. Ryland appeared at the ravine's edge, looking down. His eyes met hers. For 3 eternal seconds, neither moved. Then something changed in the forest. The air pressure shifted. Birds went silent mid-call. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A growl rolled through the trees. Low, resonant, wrong. Not a wolf. Not entirely. Something with wolf vocal cords but vocal range that went deeper than any natural animal should reach. Ryland's face went pale. His hand dropped to the knife at his belt, but didn't draw it. Drawing a weapon in the king's territory without permission was suicide. The growl came again, from a different direction. Then a third, surrounding them. 3 distinct voices, 3 different tones, all carrying the same message. Leave. Now. Ryland looked at Seris one more time. Something passed across his face. Maybe regret, maybe relief that the choice was being taken from him. Then he ran. Both hunters crashed through the forest like it was chasing them. their footsteps fading to nothing in seconds. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. Seris felt them before she saw them. Pressure against her damaged Omega senses, like standing too close to a bonfire. Power condensed into physical form, pressing against reality until reality bent. 3 wolves appeared at the ravine's edge. The largest was midnight black with silver markings around its eyes, muscles rippling beneath fur that looked like it could stop blades. Kael'ric had to be. The stories said he was the enforcer, the one who ended fights before they started. The second wolf was smaller but no less dangerous. Russet brown coat marked with scars that spoke of 100 fights won. Othrin, the fighter, the one who'd never submitted to anyone except his brothers. The third wolf hung back slightly, white-gray coat almost glowing in the dim forest light, eyes that seemed to look straight through flesh into something deeper. Valor, the strategist, the one people said could read your intentions in your scent. They shouldn't be here. The Triplet Alpha Kings stayed in their sanctum, emerged only for territorial violations or direct challenges. They didn't track rejected Omegas into the forest, didn't involve themselves in pack politics. So why were they standing at the edge of a ravine, staring at her like she was the most important thing in their territory? Kael'ric's gaze dropped to her shoulder, to the still-burning rejection mark. His lips pulled back from massive teeth, a snarl building in his chest that made the ground vibrate. Othrin's attention fixed on the bloodstains covering her dress, her arms, her hands. His claws extended, digging furrows in frozen dirt. Valor's focus landed on the cub pressed against her side, then back to her face. Something crossed his expression, recognition, maybe, or understanding. The cub whined softly and tried to take a step toward them. Seris's hand shot out on instinct, pulling the pup back against her chest, protecting it. From what? She didn't know. The kings were its rightful owners, had to be. The royal crest proved that. But her body moved before her brain caught up. Some deep Omega instinct screaming that she'd saved this life and she wasn't surrendering it to anyone. Not even them. All 3 wolves went absolutely still. Then Valor made a sound. Not a growl. Something softer, questioning, almost approving. Kael'ric shifted closer to the ravine's edge, lowering his massive head to scent the air. His nose almost touched her before she flinched back on pure instinct. The reaction made all 3 wolves freeze. They were reading her responses, she realized. Testing. Trying to understand why a rejected Omega was protecting one of their cubs instead of using it as leverage or abandoning it to save herself. Seris met Valor's eyes, the strategist, the one most likely to understand complex motivations. "I'm not giving him back for a reward," she said. Her voice came out hoarse, broken, but clear. "And I'm not using him to bargain. I stopped because..." She looked down at the cub, at those trusting gold eyes. Because someone had to. Silence stretched between them. Then her body betrayed her. Her legs gave out. The world tilted sideways. She felt herself falling but couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't catch herself. She didn't hit the ground. Kael'ric moved faster than physics should allow for something his size, launching into the ravine and positioning his massive body beneath her before she collapsed. His fur was impossibly warm, heating her frozen skin on contact. Her fingers tangled in it without permission, seeking warmth her body desperately needed. The cub scrambled onto Kael'ric's back beside her. Settling against her side like this was exactly where it belonged. Othrin and Valor descended into the ravine in one fluid motion, flanking Kael'ric, creating a wall of protection around her that felt wrong, impossible. Alpha Kings didn't protect rejected Omegas, didn't shelter them, didn't look at them with expressions that bordered on possessive concern. "I don't understand," Seris whispered, consciousness starting to slip. "Why do you care?" Valor's nose touched her forehead, gentle despite his size. His scent wrapped around her, pine and winter storms and something ancient that made her Omega nature respond in ways it never had before. Then Othrin howled. Not a call. Command. The entire forest responded. Distant wolves answering, closer ones going silent. everything within 5 miles acknowledging that the Kings had claimed something. Or someone. Seris's eyes closed before she could process what that meant. The last thing she felt was Kael'ric standing, her weight nothing to him, carrying her deeper into Graypine while his brothers guarded their path. And somewhere very far away, in a hollow oak tree, 43 names waited in darkness for someone to remember them. Seris woke to silk against her skin. Her eyes opened slowly, vision blurring before focusing on carved stone, ceiling 40 feet above. Not a cave, a chamber. Massive windows let in pale morning light that painted everything in shades of silver and gold. The sanctum. She tried to sit up. Her body refused, muscles locked tight with pain that had settled into every bone. The rejection mark on her shoulder blade throbbed with steady rhythm, infection already setting in despite the clean bandages someone had wrapped around her torso. Someone had undressed her, cleaned her wounds, laid her in sheets that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned. Panic spiked through her chest. The cub. Where was? A soft whine answered before she could finish the thought. She turned her head, ignoring the way the movement made her vision swim, and found the white wolf pup curled on a cushion beside the bed. Its leg was properly splinted now, wrapped in clean linen, the bloodstains gone. It watched her with those unsettling gold eyes, tail thumping once against the cushion like it was relieved she was awake. "You're safe," a voice said from the shadows. Seris jerked, the sudden movement sending fire through her shoulder. A figure stepped into the light. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. He wore simple clothes, nothing marking him as royalty, but power rolled off him in waves that made her Omega instincts scream warnings. Valor. Had to be. Even in human form, she recognized those eyes. "The hunters," she managed, her throat raw. "Did you? They left our territory." His voice was deep, measured. "They won't return." She waited for him to say more, to explain why she was here, why they'd brought her to the sanctum instead of leaving her in the forest to die like rejected Omegas were supposed to. He didn't offer explanations. Instead, he moved closer, pulling a chair beside the bed with careful deliberation. When he sat, his scent washed over her, pine and winter storms and something that made her damaged wolf stir for the first time since the rejection. "You saved our brother's cub," Valor said. It wasn't a question. Seris looked at the pup, then back at him. "I stopped because someone had to. While bleeding out, while being hunted. You stopped." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Valor studied her with an intensity that should have felt threatening but somehow didn't. "What's your name?" "You already know it." She'd heard Ryland shout it in the forest. Heard the hunters use it while they tracked her. "I want to hear you say it." There was something in his tone. Not a command. A request. Like her name mattered more than her file, more than her crimes, more than the mark burned into her skin. "Seris," she whispered. "Seris Vale." He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out over forest that stretched to the horizon. "Your pack rejected you for stealing records," he said. Still not a question. "For copying them. And what did those records contain?" The truth sat on her tongue, heavy and dangerous. She could lie. Could say it was a misunderstanding. Could play the role of grateful Omega rescued by powerful alphas and hope they'd protect her long enough for her to disappear. But she was so tired of silence. "Proof," Seris said, "that my pack has been killing Omegas for decades and calling it resource management." Valor went very still. When he turned back to face her, his expression had shifted into something cold and absolutely lethal. "Show me," he said. And behind him, framed in the doorway, his two brothers stood watching with eyes that promised violence if she'd just point them in the right direction. The records surfaced 3 days later. Not all at once. Not with dramatic announcements or formal investigations. Just slow leaks that spread through the northern territories like poison in a water supply. A reassigned land parcel here. A missing Omega's name there. Ration logs that didn't match population counts. each piece small enough to dismiss individually, damning when viewed together. Seris watched it happen from a chair by the sanctum windows, her shoulder still healing, her strength returning in frustrating increments. The Triplet Kings had sent riders to the hollow oak, retrieved her satchel, copied every page of her journal and distributed them to neighboring packs, to the Territorial Council, to anyone with authority to demand answers. Elder Creve fell first. Stripped of position, exiled to the outer territories where rejected Omegas had been sent to die. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Counselor Jessa Thorne followed 2 days later, her property seized, her family name stripped from official records. She'd screamed about injustice during her sentencing, about how she'd only followed protocol, about how everyone had known and no one had cared until now. She was right about that last part. Marcus Holt tried to run. Made it to the southern border before Othrin's hunters brought him back. His trial lasted 4 hours. His exile was immediate. The pack erupted in celebration. Banners appeared overnight declaring justice served and new dawn for the northbound territories. Speeches were made about transparency and reform. The acting council announced sweeping changes, oversight committees, public audits, protections for Omegas that looked impressive on paper. Seris felt nothing. She sat in the sanctum watching her former pack celebrate their own righteousness, and the emptiness in her chest grew wider with each proclamation of change, because these were the same voices that had watched her burn. The same people who'd stayed silent while 43 Omegas disappeared. The same pack that had called her a traitor for documenting what they'd all chosen to ignore. Now they were heroes for believing her. "You should be pleased," Kaelric said from behind her. The largest of the 3 brothers, built like violence barely contained. "You won." Seris didn't turn around. "Did I?" "The corrupt are punished. The system is changing. Your evidence brought down leadership that's been untouchable for decades." He moved to stand beside her chair. "That's victory. That's performance." She finally looked at him. "They're not changing because they learned something. They're changing because they got caught. There's a difference." Kaelric's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Below, in the territory's main square, someone was building a memorial. For the 43, names carved in stone, flowers placed at the base. The whole pack gathering to pay respects to Omegas they'd never bothered knowing while alive. "They want to honor you too," Valor said, appearing in the doorway with that uncanny timing all 3 brothers seemed to share. "The pack is calling you a hero." Seris laughed. The sound came out bitter, broken. "6 days ago they watched me burn. Now I'm a hero. What changed?" "The truth came out," Othrin offered, leaning against the doorframe, scars visible on his forearms, fighter's hands relaxed but ready. "People know what happened now. People always knew." Seris pushed herself to standing, ignoring the pull of healing tissue across her shoulder. They just didn't care until it became inconvenient not to. The 3 brothers exchanged looks, some silent communication passing between them. Then Kaelric spoke, his voice careful. "We want to offer you protection. Formally. A bond that would make you untouchable." Her heart stopped. "You'd be safe," Valor added. "Honored. The pack would never dare." "No." The word dropped into silence like a stone into still water. All 3 of them went very still, alpha instincts clearly not accustomed to refusal. "No," Othrin repeated like he'd misheard. Seris met their eyes one by one. "I won't be your proof that the system fixed itself." The sanctum's main hall fell silent except for crackling fire in the massive hearth. Seris stood facing 3 Alpha Kings who looked at her like she'd just spoken a language they didn't understand. The cub, recovered now, walking without a limp, pressed against her leg, offering support she desperately needed. "Explain," Kaelric said, not angry, genuinely confused. She took a breath, felt the healing mark on her shoulder pull tight. "If I bond to you now, I become a story. The rejected Omega who got rescued by powerful alphas and lived happily ever after. The pack gets to point at me and say, 'See, we fixed it. Everything's fine now.'" "You earned protection," Valor said quietly. What you did, what you risked. I didn't do it for protection. Her voice came out sharper than intended. I did it because 43 people died and no one cared enough to write their names down. Because my pack chose profit over lives and called it necessary. Because silence was easier than justice. Othrin's claws extended slightly, an unconscious response. And we're offering you safety, status, a bond that would prevent anyone from ever hurting you again. Safety isn't justice, Seris said. It's just a nicer cage. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, celebration continued. Music and laughter drifting up from the territory below. The sound of people convincing themselves they'd learned something. What do you want then? Kael'ric asked. His control was cracking, frustration bleeding through. We exposed the corruption, punished the guilty, reformed the system. What more? I want you to change what people believe they're allowed to ignore. Seris cut him off, her hand finding the cub's fur, anchoring herself. Laws are easy, policies are easy, but changing what pack members think is acceptable, what they'll stay silent about, that's hard. That takes years. And it doesn't happen just because you punished 3 elders and made some speeches. Valor moved closer, his expression shifting from confused to something that looked like understanding. You think the pack will go back to old ways once attention moves elsewhere. I know they will. She met his eyes. Because people don't change through fear of punishment. They change when they fundamentally believe something is wrong. And right now, the pack doesn't believe what happened to those 43 Omegas was wrong. They believe getting caught was wrong. Silence stretched between them. Then Audrin spoke, his voice rough. So you're refusing us? Completely. I'm refusing to be your proof that everything's fine now. She looked at each of them in turn. If I stay, if I bond, the pack stops having to reckon with what they let happen. They get their happy ending and move on. Nothing really changes. And if you leave? Kael'ric's question came out quiet, almost vulnerable. Then the question stays open. The wound stays visible. People have to sit with their complicity instead of covering it with celebration. Seris's throat tightened. That's the only way real change happens. Valor's jaw worked, processing. You're punishing yourself to teach them a lesson. I'm refusing to let them off easy. She corrected. There's a difference. The cub whined softly, pressing harder against her leg. It had bonded to her over the past few days, following her everywhere, sleeping beside her bed. Now it seemed to sense what was coming. Kael'ric took a step forward, then stopped himself. His hands flexed like he wanted to reach for her but knew she'd pull away. What if we could guarantee real change? Long-term reform? Would that be enough? What would be enough, Seris said carefully, is when people stop needing me to forgive them, when they fix things because it's right, not because I'm watching, when silence stops being the default response to injustice. That could take years, Audrin said. Probably. She managed a sad smile. Which is why I can't stay. Valor's eyes closed briefly, pain flickering across his features. When he opened them again, something had shifted. You're asking us to let you go. I'm asking you to respect that some things matter more than safety. Seris's voice cracked. And to prove that power willing to tolerate refusal is different than power that demands submission. The 3 brothers looked at each other. Another silent conversation, longer this time, weighted with implications she couldn't fully read. Finally, Kael'ric spoke. If we let you walk away, we can't protect you. I know. The forest is dangerous. You're still healing. You have no pack, no resources, no. I know, she repeated. I'm choosing it anyway. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Will the Kings let her go? Can real change happen without her? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Seris left the sanctum at dawn. No ceremony, no audience. Just her and a leather pack the brothers had filled with supplies she hadn't asked for. Medical kit, food, a blade she barely knew how to use. The cub followed her to the forest edge, limping slightly despite its healed leg. It had cried when she tried to leave it behind, scratching at the door until Valor opened it with a look that said he understood some bonds couldn't be broken by logic. She knelt in the frost, pressing her forehead against the pup's fur. "You belong with them," she whispered. "You're royal, important. You can't just—" The cub licked her face and planted itself firmly at her feet. Apparently, she could. Behind them, the sanctum's massive doors remained closed. The brothers had said their goodbyes last night, Kaelric with a gruff warning about dangerous territory, Othrin with coordinates to safe houses he'd established along the border, Valor with a look that felt like it was carving pieces out of both of them. They hadn't tried to stop her, hadn't argued, hadn't done anything except prove they meant what they said about respecting her choice. Somehow that hurt worse than if they'd fought her. Seris walked. The forest swallowed her within minutes. Ancient trees closing ranks, pack territory fading behind her with each step. Her shoulder ached. Her legs weren't as strong as they should be. But she was alive and free, and that had to count for something. News of her refusal spread faster than winter fire. By the third day, she heard whispers in the small border settlement where she stopped for supplies. Merchants debating whether the rejected Omega who'd turned down the Triplet Kings was brave or insane. Travelers wondering what it meant that Alpha royalty had let her walk away instead of forcing a bond. The pack itself was fracturing. Some celebrated her choice, calling it proof that Omegas didn't need Alpha protection to have value. Others called her ungrateful, foolish, throwing away safety for pride. The council was divided on whether to continue reforms or scale back now that their symbol had refused to play her part. Seris heard it all and kept walking. On the fifth day, she felt them. Not close, miles back, keeping careful distance. But there, 3 distinct presences moving parallel to her path, never approaching, never leaving. The kings were following her, not controlling, not demanding, just there, making sure she stayed safe even after she'd refused their protection. She should have been angry, should have told them to leave her alone, that this defeated the whole point. Instead, she felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen since the rejection ceremony. They were learning, power that could let her go, that could follow without controlling, that could change behavior without demanding she validate the change. That was different. That was growth. The cub noticed her crying before she did, pressing its nose against her hand with a concerned whine. "I'm okay," she told it, voice thick. "Just tired." That night, camped in a small cave with the cub curled against her side, she heard a howl in the distance. Then another, then a third, not summoning her, not demanding, just letting her know they were still there, still watching, still waiting for her to decide what came next on her own terms. The pack back home heard those howls too. And according to rumors that reached her days later, something shifted. The council stopped making speeches about justice, started actually implementing changes, transparent audits, Omega advocacy positions, real consequences for abuse of power. Not because it looked good, because 3 Alpha Kings were watching, waiting to see if they'd earn back the Omega who'd exposed them. People were changing, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, because she'd refused to let them off easy. Seris stared into the fire, the cub's warmth against her side, and wondered if maybe victory didn't always look like winning. Sometimes it looked like walking away and trusting others to do better without you there to force it. The cub lifted its head suddenly, ears perked toward the cave entrance. Seris tensed, hand going to the blade. "What is it?" The pup didn't growl, just watched the darkness beyond the firelight with those knowing gold eyes. Then it stepped forward and howled. Puppy's howl, high and uncertain, but carrying weight that made the hair on Seris's neck stand up. 3 answering calls echoed from the forest, closer than before, and beneath them something else responded, deeper, older, a sound that didn't belong to any wolf Seris had ever heard. The cub's tail wagged once. Then the forest went absolutely silent, and Seris understood with sudden clarity that whatever had been sleeping in Graypine's heart had finally woken up, and it was coming for her. The thing that stepped into the firelight wasn't entirely wolf. Seris saw it in pieces. Massive paws that left prints too large, eyes that reflected silver instead of gold, a presence that made reality bend around the edges. The cub didn't run, just sat beside her, tail still wagging like it had been waiting for this. The creature studied her with an intelligence that felt ancient and knowing and somehow amused. Then it spoke, not in words, in feelings pressed directly into her mind. You broke their story. Seris's breath caught. She should run, should scream, should do literally anything except sit there while something older than the forest itself communicated through thoughts instead of sound. What are you? She managed. What your pack forgot. The presence moved closer, and Seris saw it properly now. A wolf the size of a small house, fur that seemed woven from starlight and shadow, markings that shifted like living ink across its coat. Before territories, before kings, before alphas decided they owned everything. The first wolf, she whispered. Legends her grandmother had told her. Stories about the original spirit that gave wolves the ability to shift, to bond, to build packs. The creature's amusement felt like warm wind. I have no name. I am what remains when power forgets why it existed. Behind her, crashing through underbrush, the Triplet Kings arriving at a dead run, probably tracking the sudden spike of ancient power flooding the territory. They burst into the clearing and stopped cold, seeing what stood before her. All three dropped to their knees immediately. Submission, respect, fear. The first wolf ignored them. His attention stayed fixed on Seris. You chose memory over safety, truth over belonging. The hard path when the easy one was offered. The presence pressed closer, its nose nearly touching her forehead. That is why I woke. I don't understand, Seris said. Packs forget. They build systems and forget why. Build hierarchies and forget purpose. Build power and forget it was meant to protect, not control. The creature's eyes seemed to look through her, past her, into something deeper. But when one small voice refuses to forget, when one Omega says, remember, that matters. That changes the pattern. Seris felt tears on her face without remembering when they started. I didn't change anything. I just walked away. You made them reckon with silence. Made them see what they chose not to see. Made power bend to truth instead of forcing truth to bend to power. The first wolf stepped back, its form already starting to fade at the edges. That is how systems break. Not through force. Through one person refusing to let them forget what they built themselves on. Wait! Seris reached out without thinking. What happens now? The creature's amusement grew. You walk forward. They walk beside you if they prove worthy. And the pack learns that justice is not a ceremony. It is a practice that never ends. Its gaze finally shifted to the three kings still kneeling in the dirt. You let her go. Let her choose. Let her refuse. The first wolf's presence expanded, filling the clearing with pressure that made even Kael'ric tremble. That is the first thing your bloodline has done right in 3 generations. Keep doing it. Then it looked at the cub pressed against Seris's side, and something that felt like a smile pressed into all their minds. The small one chose well. Listen to what it knows that you forgot. The presence faded like morning mist, leaving only normal darkness and the sound of 5 hearts beating too fast. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. A minute. Then Valor spoke, his voice shaking. In all our years, we've never. It approved. Othrin finished. The first wolf approved of her. Kael'ric stood slowly, his eyes meeting Seris's across the fire. What did it mean? Walk beside you if we prove worthy. Seris looked at these 3 powerful alphas who'd let her refuse them, who'd followed without controlling, who'd changed without demanding she validate the change. It means you don't get to decide if you're worthy, she said quietly. I do, and you earn it through actions, not promises. The cub yipped agreement. Valor's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but close. How long do we have to prove ourselves? As long as it takes. Seris stood, shouldering her pack. Could be years. Could be never. Depends on whether you keep changing or slide back into old patterns. And where will you be while we're proving ourselves? Othrin asked. She looked at the forest stretching away into darkness, full of possibility and danger and freedom she'd never had before. Walking forward, living, remembering, making sure no one else gets erased from pack memory. Alone, Kelrick's voice held something that might have been pain. Seris glanced at the cub, at the three kings who'd learned to let go, at the forest that had witnessed everything and approved. "No," she said, "not alone, just not owned." She started walking. Behind her, after a long moment, she heard footsteps following. Not close, keeping distance, respecting boundaries, proving themselves worthy one step at a time. The cub trotted beside her, tail high, like it had known all along how this would end. And somewhere deep in Graypine's heart, the first wolf watched, waiting, ready to wake again if anyone forgot what one small omega had taught them about the difference between power and control. Seris smiled into the darkness and kept walking toward a future she'd choose for herself, with witnesses who'd finally learned that the hardest form of love was letting someone be free. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories that challenge what we think we know about strength. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from safety to find something real? Your story might inspire someone who needs to hear it. Keep walking forward, and remember that being remembered matters more than being comfortable.